Welcome to Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle. I'm Bobby Owsinski, and this is a show all about music, music production, and the music business. My guest this week is audio educator and former president of the AES, John Crivet. First of all, how much are streaming services paying artists this year? Yes, in 2021. Well, we'll look at Spotify, Tidal, Apple Music, Amazon Music, and Google. It's really interesting, though, because no two royalty streams are the same. And for instance, with Spotify, there are actually over 100 royalty schemes. And that makes it very, very complicated and very difficult to really figure out. So just some of the most basic things that cause these variables. For one, it's the listener's country or territory and how much the listener pays. So for instance, in the US, it's $10, but in India, it's only $2. So if you get 1 million streams in the US, you're making a lot more money than you are in India because they're not paying as much. Then another thing is whether the listener uses the freemium tier, which is the ad-supported version, or do they use the paid subscription version? And that actually makes a huge difference. Something brand new from Spotify is something called a promotional stream. So Spotify will promote your release, but in order to do that, you're going to have to take a lower royalty. I don't know if this is worth it or not. There are a lot of pros and cons to this, but for the most part, paying for it in your pocketbook. Next comes the currency or inflation for each territory. So what happens is the rate may change because the currency is either overvalued, undervalued, valued just right, but every month, even though the user is paying the same amount, it might be worth less to you in what gets paid out in royalties. And finally is, what is the negotiated rate that you have with your label, if you have one, or a distributor for that matter? You're potentially going to be sharing some of that with the distributor, but if you're signed to a record label, they may be taking as much as 80%. So you could actually bring in a whole bunch of money and not see all that much. But we do have some averages of what you can make. Now, this is for 1 million streams. Remember that 1 million isn't what it used to be. It only sort of gets us in the ballpark. And that's when people start to take notice, but it's not the big deal as it was with sales. If you sold 1 million physical CDs or vinyl records, then that was a much bigger deal because people were paying a lot more for it. So 1 million streams aren't what you think. That being said, they're kind of a good measure here. With Amazon Music, 1 million streams will get you about $5,000. Apple Music, it's somewhere between $5,000 and $5,500. With Google Play, or now it's called YouTube Music, $12,000. Big change there. With Pandora, it's only $1,400. And YouTube, just a little better, $1,700. How much does Spotify pay out? Well, somewhere between $3,000 and $6,000 per million streams. Now, something that's coming that may change things is what they call the user-centric model. And the user-centric model is going to be adopted this year by Deezer and Tidal. What that means, if somebody listens to your song over and over and over again, more of the money that they're paying in to the platform is getting paid out to you. The way it is now, it goes into a big bundle, and it depends on your market share. But this is strictly on streams. So will this be better or worse? We don't know yet, but we're going to find out soon. Just remember that potentially you can make a lot more money from streaming than you ever could from physical product because you're eliminating all the costs involved. Also, a stream keeps paying over and over. Every time someone listens to it, you get paid, while a physical product only pays you once. If you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@bobbyowsinski.com. Don't forget about my online courses on mixing, production, branding, and music business success at bobbyowsinskicourses.com. Also, get an expert analysis and objective opinion of your songs and mixes as a member of my Hitmakers Club. Go to hitmakersclub.com to learn more. Now, we're hearing so much about spatial audio as being the savior of the music business and the next frontier of audio. Maybe it is. We've heard this before. But that being said, it does have some other uses. And one of the best is in offices. Anybody that's ever worked in an office worked in a cubicle knows how noisy it can be and how distracting it can be. But there's been ways before that have tried to combat that, and that's with some static white noise, for instance. Yes, it masked some of the office noise, not ideally, but it did help. That being said, not every employer or office building actually used it. But now, landlords and employers need a reason to lure employees back to the office, so a quieter workspace, just like they have at home, is one of the best, and that's what they're doing. So now we have two companies, Made Music Studio and Spatial, that are doing this. Actually, Made Music has been doing custom sounds and music for offices for more than 20 years. Both these companies are coming together, though. Made Music creates the content and Spatial provides the equipment. One of the first to do this is the AT&T Global Headquarters, and what they're getting is soundtracks that change with the flow of the day. Now again, this is immersive, so it's pretty cool. They're getting ambient music, and it changes to water, and it changes to chimes, and then to bird chirps. What they say is there's three types that they specialize in. Welcome ambience, which is perfect for office lobbies, for instance. Focus ambience, which centers your attention, and energizing ambience, which is for high-traffic areas like hallways or retail store or even transportation hubs. But it's been found that one of the best places for this is in hospitals. And the reason why is it decreases the stress for patients. So I'm not sure if spatial audio for music will ever catch on in a big way, but spatial audio is going to catch on in many other places. Virtual environments, for instance. Museums, you're going to hear it. And also office buildings and hospitals. That's a good thing. My guest this week is John Krivet, who's an audio educator and founder of the extremely popular Facebook group, Hey Audio Student. John is a past president of the Audio Engineering Society, and he served as the chair of the 2018 AES Conference on Audio Archiving, Preservation, and Restoration at the U.S. Library of Congress, and he was the chair of the 2018 and 2019 AES High School Audio Educators Conferences. Currently, he's a director of education and professional audio design and does consulting with other manufacturers of audio technology. John is also a senior affiliated faculty at Emerson College, where he's been the recipient of the Annabeth Miller Award for Excellence in Teaching and the Norm Prescott Award for Outstanding Faculty Member. During the interview, we talked about the not-so-obvious audio jobs, John's Hey Audio student community, conducting audio manufacturer factory tours, and much more. I spoke with John via Skype from his home in Massachusetts. Let's just go back to the beginning. Tell me about your starting in the audio business.
I got out of college. I went to college at the University of Michigan, and I studied American literature and history. But while I was there, I was in a band, and I loved, even more so, I loved it. And so I got out of school, and I did a few different things. I managed a record store that was owned by the mafia. I got into advertising, and I was 4 years out of school, and the fall came, and I'm Jewish. I'm not particularly religious, but, the Jewish New Year comes in the fall. My birthday comes around that time. School starts that time. And I thought, I just wanted to sort of get out of my workday and go to the services for Rosh Hashanah. And again, I'm not very religious, but I was just sitting there, and the whole idea is that you eat apples and honey and you give thanks to something that's good. And I thought, what's the best thing in life? What's something that's really wonderful that I should celebrate? And the Hebrew's wafting over me. I don't really remember much. And I'm just kind of thinking, and I'm thinking the greatest feeling, and I don't know whether any of your listeners will relate to this, or maybe Bobby, you'll relate to this, but it's the feeling you get when you hear a piece of music and you have to hear it again and again and again and again. And you play it until everyone you live with hates your guts. So I was thinking about that. 10 days later, is the second part of the Jewish New Year. It's called Yom Kippur, where you atone for your sins. Again, I'm not religious. I don't even believe in God, but I'm just doing this human thing, which is thinking about life. And the Hebrew's wafting over me once again, and I am thinking about what did I do wrong? And I think it's that I go to work in a firm that does advertising, and I literally look at the clock and I wish time away. I wish I was back doing something that was more interesting and more meaningful to me. So, you'd look at the clock and you'd see it's 3:30 and you'd say, come on, big hand, move a little faster. Let's go. And so I realized I needed purpose in my life. So to make a long story short, I bought a Tascam 388, which is this machine that has these 7.5-inch or 7-inch reels and together with a board. And I was just going to record anybody and everybody. And I started by charging next to nothing. And all kinds of people I put an ad in the back of the Boston Phoenix. And this is 1988, the fall of 1988. And everybody answered my little ad in the back. And they would come in and I would have all kinds of folks. And I kept raising the rates. And every time I'd raise the rates, more people would call. And I just remember I made $200 one week and I was so excited. I made $300 and $400. And then I started licensing original music to companies that made interactive software. And I was doing kids music and Christian music and all kinds of things from all around the world. It was probably, a demo studio in 1988. I was really excited about it. I figured that there were a lot of people that couldn't afford a big recording studio, but they could afford a demo studio. And it was before people could do these things on their phones. And I just kept raising it, and more people would come. I moved it into an office building. I kept sort of upping my game and doing different things. I was really enjoying it. I was in an area that had a lot of high tech. So I was working for companies like Oracle and doing all kinds of things with intranets and 8-bit recordings because memory was very expensive, even to companies like Oracle. And someone asked me about teaching, and I started teaching at a school. Probably I didn't know enough, but I just started doing it. And that was great. My department chair said, John, you're going to be our faculty advisor of our new AES student chapter. And I thought, oh boy, this is going to be the worst thing that ever happened to me. People are going to realize how little I know, and they're going to discover the big Swiss cheese holes in my understanding and my training in audio. And I'll tell you, what I learned was that curiosity is the most powerful tool in anything. And I just started inviting people I was curious about to all these co-curricular after-school events. And the first person I had was Don Palouse, a fellow I knew who had been the dean at the Berklee College of Music, and before that, a legendary recording engineer, recording people like Sly and the Family Stone and Chicago and Bob Dylan. Don came and he spoke to students about his career working for CBS Records. I had a very small company with 3 employees come in and talk about how you could use their software to master entirely in the box. And everybody kind of snickered and laughed at them. And that company was Isotope. And they went on to hire one of my students as their 4th employee. And now they've got hundreds of people and they're influencing everything that we do in mastering. Brilliant folks over there in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I had a special agent from the FBI come in and talk about forensic audio and surveillance and what kinds of tools the FBI was using. I was doing all kinds of things. I started doing this event called the Boston Area Definitive Audio Student Summit, which was known as BADAS. I had some concern that the AES mucky mucks would think that it would be a little too, ribald a name to use with such an important society, but they all liked it. I had this event that I ran for about 7 years that had from, I think, 2007, where we had about 400 to 500 college audio students from all over the Northeast mostly. And we would do kind of a miniature AES convention where we'd have workshops, tutorials, presentations, exhibitions, panels, sound trucks, all kinds of things were there. It was really cool. And, we would really encourage students to then take the leap of faith and go to the AES convention. People from AES kind of noticed it. I was invited to join the AES Education Committee, which I thought was kind of cool, to meet other educators and understand what they were doing in their pedagogies and curriculums. And fascinating. I was asked, there was a new AES president coming, and the AES president chooses all the committee heads. And this AES president, Jim Anderson from NYU, asked me if I would be the the vice chair of the AES Education Committee. And of course, I was honored to do that. And I got involved in things like the recording competition and the student design competition and recruiting judges and doing all kinds of things for the committee to engage students and educators. And then I ran for vice president of the AES for the East Coast, and I lost to someone from Toronto. I didn't really understand at that time, like who votes and how it worked. And I guess they didn't want to lose my energy. So the new president who's coming in, Jim Kaiser, who's a wonderful professor at Belmont University and a wonderful mastering engineer, Jim Kaiser, when he became president, asked me if I wanted to be the chair of the AES Education Committee, which was great. It was awesome. And we built this wonderful community of educators around the world, lots of events to engage students and to advance, the idea of how we teach and what we teach and how we influence workflows and how we address the moving target of technology. So I did that for a while. And then I was asked if I would run for president of AES. Of course, I said, yeah, sure, it's great. And I won an election, and I became the president of AES in 2000, and I served in 2015 and 2016. And I was asked if I would come back, and after being the president and being the education chair again, I am doing it together now with a really brilliant fellow named Gabe Herman, who's a professor at the University of Hartford, who you should have on your podcast because he's amazing and has done some really brilliant things. And I am stepping off the leadership at the end of this year, but I would just tell anybody that the greatest thing for my career has been to be a member of the Audio Engineering Society. It's, in good times and more lean times, it just is this connection to this wonderful community of people who are doing every facet of audio. And if you really want to demonstrate that you are curious and that you want to up your game and that you are interested in really the highest levels of all of what we do, there's no better way of doing it than being a member of AES. So I'm also, through all that, I've been teaching. I'm still teaching I've taught at a number of different schools, but I'm just teaching at Emerson College right now in Boston. And I love my students there. They're mostly geared towards television and film, but they are curious and they're smart. And I've really enjoyed being there. I do some consulting for, I'd say right now, 9 different companies that are in the audio field, doing all kinds of connecting to educators and making sure that some of their great technology winds up in classrooms and in pedagogies and in curriculums and on syllabuses. And I guess I think of myself as a bridge builder. One last thing, I have a Facebook group that I started about 7.5 years ago. It's called Hey Audio Student. It's got about 33,000 members, which isn't a huge number for the internet, but I'm getting a pretty good rate of engagement. So, this summer, I think we were up to like 79% of all the members had been engaged within the last month, or the last 28 days.
Well, I want to get to that more in a second, but I saw that you have a number of outstanding teacher awards.
Anyone can buy those. I'm kidding. I think I'm a good communicator. I think the issue is that, if things come easily to you, if you understand difficult concepts pretty clearly, then you might not have the ability to explain them to other people. And I think that the fact that, I guess my role, or I feel like my role, is to take a difficult concept and to try to make it as simple as possible for students. And, the other thing is, when you think back at your favorite teachers, they were probably the ones that engaged with you more personally, as opposed to folks who just got up there and taught. So I'm honored to be on.
Let's talk about Hey Audio Student. How did that come about?
Well, I've always done a lot of events. I did this event at the Boston Public Library. It was a wax cylinder recording session that we were doing. And we had an auditorium that sat 450 people, and there was a line out the door that people couldn't get in. And I asked people, how did you hear about this? I asked the audience, and they said, Facebook. So I figured that, I really should up my social media games. So about 7.5 years ago, I started this group called Hey Audio Student. I want to chronicle the events and opportunities that are available to students really of all ages and levels, because we're all learning and we're all upping our game, and the technology keeps changing. So I will chronicle what people are doing in classrooms. I'll chronicle different AES events or other organizations that are hosting events that I think are a great way to meet people and to understand what's going on. I used to play a game called Words with Friends on my phone to kind of, I guess, get more dopamine in my brain. And now instead, I repost job leads that I see. So I'm constantly looking for job leads and internship opportunities, and I throw them up on Hey Audio Student just kind of mindlessly. Some days I might have 70 or 80 or 90 job leads up there.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And, also, I think as an educator, I would be a fraud if I was not teaching my students the economy of audio. Like, where are the jobs? What are the jobs? What are people doing? People come in, they're 17, 18, 19 years old. They're all thinking, hey, I want to record my punk rock band, or I want to make beats. And I think my role and a big part of what I do is to say, that's not impossible with an audio degree, but here, you like sports too. Maybe you'll hold a parabolic microphone at a New England Patriots football game and make $500, or you'll be making podcasts, or you'll be doing sound design, or lots of different kinds of things that people are doing for wonderful, sustainable careers. And that's kind of what I'm trying to educate folks about.
I think you're right, though. The general perception with most students when they start is, well, there's only one path here. And it depends. If you're in film or television, then that's the path. And if you're a music student, then that's the path. But there are so many other jobs available.
Oh, of course. I mean, what I've found is that, it used to be that someone would go to audio school, or maybe they'd be an intern somewhere, work their way up in a recording studio. But a lot of those budgets have shrunk, and the record companies aren't funding those kinds of things. What you find is people recording with their own phones, their computers, and maybe they're purchasing software at Isotope, or they're purchasing software from Avid or Apple or Eventide or Bettermaker or Leapwing. And those companies are great places to work. And, they're always looking for smart people that understand audio. And I had a student say to me, John, I came to school because I wanted to make music, but what I've realized is I'm making the tools now that, other people are using to make their music. And that's actually very satisfying.
I think that's a gateway, though, and it's sort of a traditional gateway. I know when I moved to Los Angeles, the first job I got was at an audio distributor, everything audio. And I was there for a couple of years, but it was great. I met so many people. And originally I was a broadcast guy, and I had no idea about broadcast. But after a while, I knew everybody in film and the television industry out here and whatever, and it was a great way to really break into business. But a lot of other people that were at similar positions, we all kind of moved on later, and it was a jumping off point.
Yeah. So I think what I'd like people to do, what I encourage my students to do, is get yourself into a place where you're going to continue to learn. I think a lot of people have this false idea that you're going to go to school for 4 years, study audio, and come out and be exactly the same person, the same expert for the next 40 years until you retire. And that's not really the case. You're going to continue to grow, continue to learn. There are going to be new technologies. I think you go to school so that you can understand how to interact and how to interface with that moving missile of technology that keeps happening. And so I think if you can find yourself in a place like an ESPN, as opposed to a basement pot smoking recording studio, you're probably more likely to keep learning and to keep availing yourself to new technologies and understanding broadcast standards, which is important.
Yeah, one of the things that I've found is a lot of people will go to school and then they'll go back to where they came from and become a big fish in a small pond. And that's not exactly the best career path, because really you'd want to be a small fish in a big pond, working for somebody who's really big and learning from them. And that propels you very quickly, but it's hard to get that across sometimes.
Well, that's a really excellent point. And that's why a lot of students come out and they feel like, hey, I've got to convey that I'm an expert, that I know everything about these kinds of microphones or these kinds of optical compressors. And the truth of the matter is that, folks a little older are going to look at someone who claims expertise and think, you can't really be an expert when you're 22 years old. But I think what's more impressive to folks like us, Bobby, is curiosity. So again, I go back to that. When a kid says, hey, you know what, I'm in my junior year of college and I'm just trying to learn everything I possibly can. Kids will ask me, hey, well, what happens if someone asks me why am I at the AES convention? To say, look, I'm just in my, very first audio class. but I'm trying to learn as much as I possibly can. That to me is a lot more impressive than I'm here because I'm a young expert.
Yeah, I agree. What's interesting that I've always found when I was teaching was that there's always two or three that really get it, that are way out in front of everybody else. And when I first started to teach, I began to concentrate on them. And then I realized, no, wait, that's not the best way to do it, because many times you go to school to figure out what you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And the more you're immersed in it, the more you figure that out.
Yeah.
That's an important part, and it took me a while to kind of figure that out as a teacher.
Well, I think also something that motivated me, if I've got 12 people in a studio class and 12 students, and, one of them is, like you said, fabulous. And, I'm thinking about the kid who's like number 11, and he's thinking, boy, why did I even think that this was a good idea to spend all this money to go to school? There are 12 kids in this class. I'm close to the bottom, if not the bottom. What makes me think that I'm going to get a job here and do something? And what I would say is, it took me years to figure out that there are much better audio engineers than myself. And there are a lot of people who know a lot more, and great researchers and great writers and scholars about audio. But I think that there are some other talents that I might have that I've come to appreciate: the ability to connect people, the ability to build bridges, the ability to maybe make a student feel some confidence in sort of getting out in the world. And so, I don't know. I think that there's a place for the folks who maybe aren't number one in their audio.
Yes, yeah. It's funny. Yesterday, I had a talk with an old friend, and he was referring to my online courses. He's an engineer. He's a very good engineer. And he says, I know exactly what you're doing there. I said, yes, but this isn't for you. It's for the people that don't know any of this stuff.
Yeah. I always, I feel like we need to be respectful of the people who are the great experts. That's something I really like about Hey Audio Student. I've got the high school kid who asks, why do I need an interface? What is that all about? And what kind of microphone can I buy for $65? And I also have the men and women who are writing the peer-reviewed articles for the Journal of the Audio Engineering Society. And the one thing, it's not always easy, but I try to keep everybody respecting everybody else and not looking, the elite folks, not looking down on the new people. We all started someplace, and that to me is important.
You control it very well. As you know, social media can get out of hand very quickly, and I haven't seen that at all on Hey Audio Student. And it's especially with younger people that tend to think they know more than they know. I see this on my Facebook ads all the time. I stop reading comments because it's like, boy, there are some people that are brutal. And it's like, well, yeah, but you don't quite get it.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm the first person to admit there are many ways of looking at things, and mine might not be perfect. So a lot of times people will ask me my expert opinion about something. And what I'll do is I'll say, hey, throw that up on Hey Audio Student. Let's crowdsource that answer and get 125 people telling you, what to look at or what to consider. And I think that that's actually pretty good. And hopefully people don't kill each other in the process.
Yeah, right. Tell me about the factory tours that you do.
So I used to bring students 100 miles southwest of my students from Boston, 100 miles southwest to the Telefunken microphone factory in South Windsor, Connecticut. And man, it's like a Willy Wonka tour for anybody who loves audio. Really phenomenal. So much history in that place, so much amazing technology. And when the pandemic happened, we talked about doing these things online and doing them via Zoom. So we've done for about a year and a half now, virtual factory tours of the Telefunken microphone factory in South Windsor, Connecticut. We've done them for groups in Myanmar and India and the Philippines and Poland and Germany and Belgium and all over Latin America and Mexico and all over the United States, for AES groups, for schools, for colleges, for high schools. And it's really interesting. If you're teaching audio, it just fills in. It dovetails really nicely with, if you're teaching about frequency response graphs, you'll see the technician actually creating the frequency response graph, doing the measurements. You'll see what kind of software he's or she is doing. You'll witness the devices that they use. You'll see new old stock tubes and how they're burned in. You'll see the difference between, what happens in a 7-pin connector versus a 3-pin connector. You'll see the difference between an edge terminated capsule and a center terminated capsule and how that affects things like proximity effect. And it's just wonderful. They last about 60 or 70 minutes, depending upon questions. And we offer them for free. We just ask that there be a group of at least about 25 people. And so it's great for education. And also, students get to see what someone does in a microphone factory, what the different roles are. And so that's been wonderful for Telefunken to sort of offer that kind of education. And it's been great for them in a situation where the NAMM show and the ES show and all kinds of other trade shows are slowed down, or we don't really know where they're at. It's a great way for them to get out there and talk to students. It's not a sales thing at all. It's really about just kind of making a connection and offering some educational value to students who don't always get the opportunity to see what goes on in the inside of a microphone.
Well, I have to admit, I really enjoyed it. I didn't see the tour per se, but I was there when we did the Educators Conference a couple of years ago, and there was the party afterwards there at the Telefunken factory. It was great. I loved it, even though I didn't see people working or doing any of the things you talked about. But nonetheless, it gives you a different perspective on exactly what the company's doing. You look at microphones a different way when you see them in pieces like that.
Absolutely. And, to see microphones that are close to 100 years old and to understand how the technology has changed, what you have there at Telefunken is a company built out of passion. These guys are making microphones not because some corporation thinks it's a business and they have to make money for stockholders. It's about a love of microphones and always upping the game and always doing something great and paying a lot of attention to history. And that's a really cool place. I think that they're doing an amazing job there. And it's wonderful to be able to build a bridge between Telefunken and the academic world.
Yeah, definitely. Last question, John. Thanks so much for doing this. This is fun.
You know what? I really appreciate it. I've been a huge fan of yours for many years. I really admire your expertise and your great ability to communicate with people. And I'm a big fan, and I'm honored that you asked me to be on your podcast.
Well, thank you. Likewise. What's the best piece of advice that either you learned along the way or maybe somebody imparted to you?
Well, I'm going to give you two things really quickly. One is stay curious. That's really important. And the other is there's a great quote by Maya Angelou, the late Maya Angelou, who said, "People won't remember what we did and they won't remember what we said, but they'll always remember how we made them feel." And Bobby, you asked me to be on your podcast, this great podcast that I listen to all the time. And that makes me feel good. So I will forever think of you. When I see that you call, I'm always going to think, hey, there's my friend Bobby Owsinski. Pretty cool. It starts when you're a student. If you are sitting in the front row asking lots of questions, that is, that's making your professor feel good. When you're walking up to someone at an AES convention and introducing yourself and asking them questions about them, not just necessarily talking about yourself, you're making them feel good. They'll always associate you with feeling good. So I think that's it. It's think about how you're making people feel. Be curious about them. Don't just assume that they want to hear everything about you. Eventually, if you really want to tell them something about you, it's the best thing you can tell them is that you're curious about them. So I'd say stay curious and make people feel good and keep learning. Don't assume that you know everything. And I'm just thrilled to be here. Thank you so much.
You can find out more about John and Hey Audio Student at johncrivet.com. That's John, John, Crivet, Krivit.com. Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@bobbyowsinski.com. To listen to other episodes of Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle, go to bobbyowsinski.com and select the podcast tab, or go to bobbyoinnercircle.com, where you can find an Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Mixcloud, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, TuneIn Radio, Radio Public, and Podbean. At bobbyowsinski.com and bobbyoinnercircle.com, you'll also find a sign-up form for my newsletter and for alerts for new podcasts. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.